each other. From the spiral canal of the modiolus, numerous canals pass outward through the osseous spiral lamina as far as its free edge. In the lower part of the first tone a second bony lamina, the secondary spiral lamina, projects inward from the outer wall of the bony tube. It does not, however, reach the primary osseous spiral lamina, so that if viewed from the vestibule, a narrow fissure, the vestibule fissure, is seen between them. The osseous labyrinth is lined by an exceedingly thin fibro-serous membrane. Its attached surface is rough and fibrous, and closely adherent to the bone. Its free surface is smooth and pale, covered with a layer of epithelium, and secretes a thin, limpid fluid, the perilymph. A delicate tubular process of this membrane is prolonged along the aqueduct of the cochlea to the inner surface of the dura mater. The membranous labyrinth. Labyrinthus membranaceus. The membranous labyrinth is lodged within the bony cavities just described, and has the same general form as these. It is, however, considerably smaller, and is partly separated from the bony walls by a quantity of fluid, the perilymph. In certain places it is fixed to the walls of the cavity. The membranous labyrinth contains fluid, the endolymph, and on its walls the ramifications of the acoustic nerve are distributed. Within the osseous vestibule the membranous labyrinth does not quite preserve the form of the bony cavity, but consists of two membranous sacs, the utricle and the saccule. The utricle, utriculus. The utricle, the larger of the two, is of an oblong form, compressed transversely, and occupies the upper and back part of the vestibule, lying in contact with the recessus ellipticus and the part below it. That portion which is lodged in the recess forms a sort of pouch or cul-de-sac, the floor and anterior wall of which are thickened, and form the macula acoustica utriculi, which receives the utricular filaments of the acoustic nerve. The cavity of the utricle communicates behind with the semicircular ducts by 5 orifices. From its anterior wall is given off the ductus utriculo-saccularis, which opens into the ductus endolymphaticus. The saccule, sacculus. The saccule is the smaller of the two vestibular sacs. It is globular in form and lies in the recessus sphericus near the opening of the scala vestibuli of the cochlea. Its anterior part exhibits an oval thickening, the macula acoustica sacculi, to which are distributed the saccular filaments of the acoustic nerve. Its cavity does not directly communicate with that of the utricle. From the posterior wall a canal, the ductus endolymphaticus, is given off. This duct is joined by the ductus utriculo-saccularis, and then passes along the aqueductus vestibuli and ends in a blind pouch, saccus endolymphaticus, on the posterior surface of the petrous portion of the temporal bone, where it is in contact with the dura mater. From the lower part of the saccule a short tube, the canalus reuniens of Hensen, passes downward and opens into the ductus cochlearis near its vestibular extremity. The semicircular ducts. Ductus semicircularis, membranous semicircular canals. The semicircular ducts are about 1/4 of the diameter of the osseous canals, but in number, shape, and general form they are precisely similar, and each presents at one end an ampulla. They open by 5 orifices into the utricle, one opening being common to the medial end of the superior and the upper end of the posterior duct. In the ampullae the wall is thickened and projects into the cavity as a fiddle-shaped, transversely placed elevation, the septum transversum, in which the nerves end. The utricle, saccule, and semicircular ducts are held in position by numerous fibrous bands which stretch across the space between them and the bony walls. Structure. The walls of the utricle, saccule, and semicircular ducts consist of 3 layers. The outer layer is a loose and flocculent structure, apparently composed of ordinary fibrous tissue containing blood vessels and some pigment cells. The middle layer, thicker and more transparent, forms a homogeneous membrana propria, and presents on its internal surface, especially in the semicircular ducts, numerous papilliform projections, which, on the addition of acetic acid, exhibit an appearance of longitudinal fibrillation. The inner layer is formed of polygonal nucleated epithelial cells. In the maculae of the utricle and saccule, and in the transverse septa of the ampullae of the semicircular ducts, the middle coat is thickened, and the epithelium is columnar, and consists of supporting cells and hair cells. The former are fusiform, and their deep ends are attached to the membrana propria, while their free extremities are united to form a thin cuticle. The hair cells are flask-shaped, and their deep, rounded ends do not reach the membrana propria, but lie between the supporting cells. The deep part of each contains a large nucleus, while its more superficial part is granular and pigmented. The free end is surmounted by a long, tapering, hair-like filament which projects into the cavity. The filaments of the acoustic nerve enter these parts, and having pierced the outer and middle layers, they lose their medullary sheaths, and their axis cylinders ramify between the hair cells. Two rounded bodies, termed otoconia, each consisting of a mass of minute crystalline grains of carbonate of lime, held together in a mesh of gelatinous tissue, are suspended in the endolymph in contact with the free ends of the hairs projecting from the maculae. According to Bowman, a calcareous material is also sparingly scattered in the cells lining the ampullae of the semicircular ducts. End of section 59.